All right, glad you can hear us, Lori. Let's get started. So, buying or building a business, it's part of the decisions that we go through as entrepreneurs. Some of you have already made that choice. Some of you are contemplating that choice of whether we're going to buy or build a business. And there's gifts and downfalls for both. So, there's no magic right answer today. Everything is case by case, but wanted to share some of the things that are really important that we do think about, and maybe some things that we don't think about when we're trying to make a decision about buying or building a business. And we're just going to share some of those lessons so you get to see it raw here. I am going to present my screen. Of course, I have a million things open because it wouldn't be me if I only had a few. So share the full screen and not that part. We want this. Okay, present. It's funny how that always works.
Building versus buying a business, it's called.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, Elena. All right, disclaimer that this is just information that we've gained through our experience, and it's not intended to say that this is the end all be all or to be only exclusive or take this information to go make a decision without further counsel, which will be actually the last slide is who do you need to surround yourself to make these decisions as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. So how did I gain this knowledge? This is what we tease about this. We got our degree at the School of Hard Knocks. Now I do have an accounting and finance degree. I do have my master's in business administration. And all of that stuff happened while I was working for organizations for the first 15 years of my career. And over the last 4 years, we've started these four different businesses, and some have been successful, and some of them have not been successful. And we're just going to be completely transparent about that, and then also add in some stories of organizations that we're aware of that maybe have seen success or not seen success. Our verticals are all different. And that plays a little bit into how quickly we see success in running a business. So I'll go through these really quick in case you're only familiar with Light Consulting. So Light Consulting is our fractional CFO organization, started 4.5 years ago when I left my CFO job and wanted to make business light for small and medium-sized businesses. Now, what I set out to do there was about 50% executive coaching and 50% financial planning and financial acumen. So CFO services is what we call that. What I ended up finding out is that the market was really okay with saying, hey, I need help with my finances, and a little less okay with saying, hey, I need help with my leadership. So right now, even to date, we probably have a 90-10 split. So consulting or the consulting part, the financial consulting part is 90% of our business and only 10% of it is leadership and coaching. What counts as an organization that we started a year after that, so in May of 2020, and that is an analytics organization. We wanted to create an app that helped organizations understand where their culture was at all times through pulse surveys and other means. So we created a tech company, so software as a service, a SaaS-based company. We created the technology. We went to market, yes, during COVID and the aftermath. And that one, I would say, was not successful. And why it was not successful is our timing was wrong when we went to market. HR professionals is how we thought we would get into businesses with an analytic tool that helps us gauge our culture. Only issue is since COVID or right during COVID and then since after, our HR professionals are super stressed with all of the things that they have going on. So they have workforce shortages, they have retention issues that they're trying to combat, and they're taking on all that burden. The last thing that they wanted was a tool that says, hey, by the way, you're really great at these things, but these things need work too. And then building a plan around that. So there are some users and organizations in our community that still use the core counts model, and they're doing great things with it and using that data to make decisions. But overall, if we want to define one of the things of success is profitability. That was a not profitable organization. We had a lot of inputs and not a lot of outputs, mostly due to sales. Light Workforce Solutions, this is an organization that we started to bring people from South Texas up to our community, house them, figure out transportation for them, and place them in manufacturing and construction organizations. This is actually the most profitable organization that we have of the four. And part of the reason that is because there's a high need there. So when demand is that high and the supply is low, then we have a bigger margin in that. So Light Workforce Solutions has been around for a year and a half. My husband Chad runs most of that day to day. I just get to do the sales piece of it and making sure that we have good partners that we're working with there. We also don't talk about it a lot. And the reason we don't is because if everybody knew we had a staffing agency, we'd get lots of phone calls. And again, the demand for those services and the supply, there's quite a differential there. And we don't like to let people down. And then Dale Carnegie Training. So this would be the business that we bought. Dale Carnegie, we bought a little over a year ago, 9:30. My partner, Melissa Marshall, runs that company. And the reason that I chose to do this webinar is because through that process, I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. We've built a couple successful businesses, one less successful, and we learned a lot through all the good and the bad. So this is going to be easy, and just buying a business that brand awareness is already there, the system's already in place, all of the things. Guess what? It's not just that easy. So we'll share a lot about that. Dale Carnegie is profitable, not as profitable as we'd like it to be, but it is profitable in the way that we are running it and all the lessons that we got to learn in buying that business. All right, there's 6 facets of business that we're going to cover today, and we're going to go through them one by one and then talk about buying versus building, what the differentiators are in these facets. Now, these are measurable facets. So sales, finance, operations. These are things that we can basically check boxes off and say, do they have enough sales to be successful? Are their finances, expenses, and debt leveraged? What is the math on that? And does that make sense? Operationally, that's another thing. Do we have the systems in place? Do we have to create the systems? And how does that look and differentiate between buying and building? The other 3 facets that are more intangible are our brand, culture, and our people. These things, again, are super important to a business, but we can't just check a box and say, yes, yes, yes. Those things are the same in buying and building. They're not the same. So we will go through all of those as well. So we're going to start with more of the measurable facets. And Josh is on here. He's a banker and our banker, and proud to have him as our banker. And these are the things that they like to see too, is historical. Yes, it's going to happen. We tease that we can put a pro forma together and we can make millions of dollars. Don't worry. Core Counts was going to make us billionaires. Yes, with a B, and it did not happen. So there is the spreadsheet. If the spreadsheet would have just come true, it would have been great. But it didn't. The spreadsheet did not come true. And that is what's so fun about being an entrepreneur, is the different facets that we have as an organization. So when we look at sales specifically, is buying a business better, or is building the business better? And these are some of the things that are under sales that are things you have to figure out as a business owner. So the speed of sales, when you're building a business, the speed of sales is slower because you have to foster every relationship. They've probably never heard of your brand before. They maybe have heard of you in your expertise that you've been existed in, maybe as a W-2 employee, but your brand self, they don't know. And how can they, especially if you're going outside of what your vertical was, that is going to take a decent amount of time to foster. Now, if you're selling ice cream cones and people like ice cream cones, that buying transaction is lower risk. So it could go faster as far as the speed of sales, but still changing my behavior from going to Dairy Queen for an ice cream cone to going to Sarah's Shake Shop for an ice cream cone. That takes time when you're building a business. And when you are buying a business, that traffic, that buyer experience already exists. So that one is more favorable from a speed of sales component. When it comes to your customer base, again, building, we're starting from scratch. So just like I would had hoped my like consulting would be 50% coaching and 50% financial consulting, and it's not. The reason that was is because people knew me as finance. They knew me as CFO, Sarah, not as executive coach, Sarah. So this was easy for them to see. This was harder for them to see. And now we're making some of that shift in the organization that I built out. So starting from scratch, if we're building a business, building on an existing base, if we're buying a business. Now, sometimes that customer base isn't your ideal customer when you're buying. So you might have some work to do there to maybe fire some clients if they're not in alignment with you and moving through some of that. But for the most part, the buying, you have that base existing already. Sales process itself, you get to build as you experience it on the building component. And from a buying, hopefully that sales process is in existence and it hopefully good and might be bad as well. So sometimes we get into buying an organization and we don't have the opportunity to vet it because of they don't want to disclose the information or they don't want their team members to hear or know about it prior to the purchase. So some of those process we have to trust in good faith. So those sales processes, if you're buying a business, should exist. Whether they're good or bad, it will be TBD, and you can do some due diligence to vet that as well. Pricing is another thing that is interesting when building versus buying. Now, when building a business, you're throwing a price out there. So if you are a retailer, it's a little bit easier because there's industry standards or there's probably a comparable product out there that you can say, this t-shirt that I'm going to buy for $10, I can sell it for 25. And that's pretty easy to figure out your pricing. When it comes to professional services, it's all over the board. So executive coaching is an example. So some executive coaches charge $5,000 an hour. Some charge as little as $150 an hour. So what is the right number for you? That's where testing the market comes in. So specifically when it comes to professional services. When our other course that we talk about how to build a business, one of the strategies that we have for figuring out what the right price is basically just doing market research. So on the financial consulting side, it's easy because we have competitors like Eide Bailly and Brady Martz in our market that are charging $325 an hour for a partner time, $125 an hour for an associate time, and we can mirror that. And when it comes to coaching in the large gamut, then you have that big number. But the thing that you'll find is just like supply and demand, if I have an abundance of time in my calendar, especially for professional services, then I need to maybe charge less. And if I don't have an abundance time in my calendar, then maybe I need to charge more because my time is more valuable because I only have so much to give. It's the only resource on earth that is actually captivated or controlled. As far as pricing, when it comes to buying a business, that price has already been established and there's already a perceived value in that. So it could be underpriced, it could be overpriced, and maybe some shifting needs to happen, but it's already there. You don't have to create anything from scratch. So when it comes to sales specifically, is building better or buying better? My experience is that buying is better for the sales component already because you get there faster. The next component and facet is finance, and this has to do with everything outside of sales, basically. So your cost of goods sold, any expenses that you have, this is what we're talking about here. So I broke out service and retail and manufacturing because these are different when it comes to building versus buying. So when the purchase price, whether that's actually purchasing the business or in the purchasing of building, you have to purchase inventory or equipment and stuff to manufacture your product if you're in that industry. So when it comes to the service industry, building is awesome because you have basically no upfront costs, maybe a laptop, maybe some stuff like that. You don't necessarily need an office right away. If you're doing a service-based business, you can build to that once you have enough money generating and money coming in, you can get an office space, but it's definitely not necessary at first when you're in a service-based business. When you buy a service-based business, you need to pay the seller. So that is more like, oh, I get to write a big fancy check or borrow money from the bank too, so that they can write a big fancy check to buy that business. So in the service industry, it's really favorable to have that low input cost, but then again, your sales are going to trickle low too. So it would depend on the ratio and how quickly you can get things up and running on that particular industry. When it comes to retail, you have to think about, okay, if I'm building a business, I am going to be writing a check for location. So if you're renting, that's your fit up costs and anything else that's inside the store and your inventory. And that can be a large check to write. That can be a lot of money from an input cost to do that. And if you're buying a business, then you get the location, the inventory, and there's often blue sky. And what that blue sky is that brand and all that sales stuff that's positive is a part of that purchase price in the retail. Manufacturing is similar. The only add-on in buying and manufacturing is you're buying a process. So taking raw goods and coming up with a finished product. That process is hopefully intellectual property and can benefit you long term. That's something else that you're buying. When it comes to building that, this can be a very slow thing because you have to find people to give you your raw goods. You have to you have to define your manufacturing process. You have to work through all of these things. When I think of organizations that are manufacturing, let's go with some that are local or Aldevron and Bushel, that they aren't manufacturing like a product, but they are because Bushel's software as a service is something that they're creating and manufacturing. Aldevron was working through biotechnology to figure out how to save lives. Like these are big things, but it's still in a manufacturing model where you're building that, you are putting a lot of money into that and you are losing money for many, many years. Depending on what it is with the many, how many manys are in there, but really it's a big piece of that working capital. So with building, you're growing at the speed of cash. So that's why when a couple of those organizations that have seen big growth in our market, what they're doing is either growing at the speed of cash of their own business, but mostly growing at the speed of cash of other people's money. So selling off shares of the organization to get capital into the organization so that they can keep moving forward, or borrowing from a bank would be another way. When it comes to buying it, the working capital hopefully has a steady growth rate and is sustainable and been there. So when it comes to the finance side, like is this thing going to make money or lose money? Buying is a more solid foundation, more sustainable. If you're building, depending on what it is you're building, service, retail, or manufacturing, just have some expectations that it's going to take a while before you can, as the owner, if you're the owner, write yourself a check. It's going to take a while till you can make money in that. Operations. So all businesses are either selling a good or a service, either product or service. And when it comes to producing a good, so this is the operations, there's lots of trial and error when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to retail and testing things out. When you're buying the business, it should already be established. So that's one thing that you want to be sure about is when you're doing that due diligence process, you're really talking about, is this process established? Does it flow smooth no matter who's in the seat? Because sometimes we can have processes that are very dependent on a human being with a special skill set. And then if that human being leaves, then we have an issue there from a producing and delivering our product or service. When it comes to delivering service, this is exchanging time for money. You pay me 325 an hour, I give you an hour of XYZ. That's a pretty easy thing to understand, but then you grow at the speed of your team. So at Light Consulting, this is our model. We exchange time for money. And we started off, or well, I started off as the one employee in 2019, and we've doubled our employee count every year since. So we're currently at 12 employees. It blows my mind when I see that picture and all those beautiful faces that that is the case. But we have to grow over time because if we just hired 40 people, would the product and would the service be delivered at the level of expectation that we've created for our clients? So there's just some speed, growth, slowness that comes with building a business. Doesn't mean it's slow, because of course you just see where people are at in the time. It just means it's not like, oh my gosh, I made $1 million last year or this year in the first year. If you do that, that's amazing, but you would be the exception, not the rule. And then when it comes to buying a delivery or a delivery service, a service-based organization, the framework to deliver should exist. So with Dale Carnegie, that was our goal. So there was a sales process, there was brand recognition, all of those things. And then there was trainers in the organization that were capable of delivering the course. And that was beautiful and should work, right? We had some experiences in there where the organization and the organization prior owner and the current owner, Melissa and Bethany, are incredible humans. They're very different. So how they run the organization is very different. So that led to some transitions that we'll talk about when we talk about the good and the bad of things. When it comes to systems to support, when you're building it, it's experimenting with options. We at first at Light, we were like, okay, whatever software you're using, we're just going to use that. We changed that last year and said, actually, to work with us, you have to use QuickBooks Online. So we shifted that because it's unfair for us to say you 12 employees have to learn 12 or however many clients you service different softwares and be effective and efficient in all of them. That just doesn't work. So we had to learn that. We also had to learn to not say yes to everybody. There's people out there that aren't core value alignment with us, and we can't say yes to them because that will create disruption in our business. And we just had to experiment a lot with that. We've experimented a lot with different softwares and which ones make our work the most efficient. With Light Workforce Solutions, one of the things we do there is we pay the guys weekly, or the guys and gals, we pay them weekly. And so we had to figure out a technology that made that process pretty smooth because doing weekly payroll for 100 people can be a little bit difficult. We figured out a lot of things, but there was a lot of trial and error where if you're buying a business, those systems should be in place. So when it comes to operations, buying versus building, buying is the easier way to go. Doesn't mean it's easier. Now we're to the more intangible things. So all those things that we just went over, sales, finance, operations, are the things that give bankers warm and fuzzies. It's okay, we're going to borrow you the money for this business because there's a track record that those things have been in existence. Now, whether you come in and screw them up or nothing, or something, just kidding, that doesn't happen ever. Just kidding, I have a list of things that didn't go well. Whether you do that or not, that's up to you. Now, so again, the tangible things, buying is more favorable than building, and mostly due to the speed in which you can get to profitability. Now, when it comes to the intangible things, we're actually seeing the opposite. So when it comes to the intangible things, we're going to talk about brand, culture, and people. So when it comes to brand, building a brand from scratch is creative and gives you freedom. And buying a brand, you have standards and processes that are established. So you can only do an Instagram post with this look and color, right? Font, all of that stuff is figured out. And if you love figuring that stuff out, then building is exciting. If you want just the template, then buying also works when it comes to brand. The other thing that with brand is brand awareness. So with building the business, you control the narrative. I got only a couple questions when I started my business about being faith forward. So our core values are love like Jesus, intentional living, give grace, help others, and trust that with Christ anything is possible. So it spells out light. So that makes it a little easier for us to remember. And being faith forward in that in a financial consulting organization was a little bit like, should I do that? But the cool thing about it is what you put out is what you attract. So for the most part, we've only attracted people who align with those core values, and we control the narrative. That's the beauty of building the brand. Now, buying a brand, what's out there is out there. So with Dale Carnegie, it has this amazing brand, a global brand where people all over the world, millions of people have gone through the Dale Carnegie course. They have a good experience. It's the one certificate that hangs on Warren Buffett's wall in his office. And there's so much goodness about it. There's also other things that might be a little bit like they're so put together and they might be a little stuffy and all of that stuff. And we, as the owners, and mainly Melissa, get to be her authentic, beautiful self and change that narrative. But that's not going to switch overnight. We need to take the time to make sure that we want to be the brand that better represents us. And why this is most important in this generation of leaders and those people who are buying our services is because we want authenticity. We want authentic leaders who can cry and laugh in the same hour and just be raw and real. So when it comes to brand awareness, making sure that you have the opportunity to control the narrative. Even if you buy, there's just you got to make slight shifts. We can't just move that over right away because it would be disruptive and then you would lose actually a chunk of what you're buying because for a sales journey from a customer perspective we want that consistency because then they know what they get. Like the reason Starbucks or Caribou are successful over the mom and pop shops is because they're consistent. So I can go to a Starbucks in Fargo and it's the same as the Starbucks in Minneapolis as far as the delivery and the product, the same as Seattle or wherever I'm traveling to. So I know what I'm getting. And in this over information age, it is important to know what we're getting. And then systems to support building in the brand. So again, we're starting from scratch. So your canvas blank. You got to pick your colors. You got to do all the things when it comes to building a brand. And when it comes to buying, those things should be already laid out. When it comes to which one is better than the other, I like building better. And I want why I think this is going to lead you to success faster in building a brand is because it's you. And whether you means multiple partners, whether that means uh, you independently, whatever that looks like, but it's you and it's authentic and it can be you and people will resonate with that. When it comes to brand, building means it's you. If you're buying and trying to be something you're not, that's not going to work very well. So when it comes to that piece, I say building. And then when it comes to people, also you can see the gold box. I should have this like pop in so it would be not a dead giveaway in what my opinion is. But when it comes to people building versus buying a business, so when we think of the individual contributors, so the people who are either delivering the product or service, what is better there? So with the building, they grow with you. So they are part of the success. They are part of the things that you are learning and growing. They are part of the success and the failures. Like, oh shoot, we should have tried to learn 12 softwares in 2 months. Maybe we should just take that off the table and do that. So they learn and grow with you. When you're buying a business, they might know more than, and there's a little bit sometimes this power struggle of you should know that you're the owner. Whether we experienced that or actually just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with they're not an owner of a business, but a big business is merging with another big business. And there was only one position to lead this department across these two large organizations. And the person I was talking with got the position, and now and there was other people from the other organization that were competing against it. And now when she has conversations with those people who are now her direct reports that were peers, some of that is, well, you should know that because you're my boss. And well, that's not a healthy culture. We don't necessarily love that, but it's a piece of it. And we, as humans, are innately selfish. So we got to think about like, how do we grow people out of that? So when it comes to individual contributors and building versus buying, building, they grow with you. Buying, they might know more than you. And maybe have more power. So your leadership style will influence that. Leaders in the organization, when you're building, they're going to adopt the values that you model. So much of my Instagram feed right now for some reason is throwing out it's not what you say, it's how you behave, that our kids do, that our team members do. So we can say don't eat chocolate, go exercise, do all those things. But if we don't actually do those things, we're not going to see results. It's no different than saying, I don't want you to work 80 hours a week, but then I, as the leader, work 80 hours a week. So we want to model the behavior that we want to build in the culture we want to build with that. When it comes to buying, we have our own, they might have their own ways of doing things, those leaders, and whether we need to shift them because it's no longer authentic to the new owners, or whether it works really great. That could be a case as well. Same with policies and procedures. As you're building a business, you establish as you grow. So you're like, we don't need all this red tape. We're under the HR guidelines of 50 employees, you have to meet these guidelines, 25, these other guidelines, 10, 5. There's all these things. Some things you don't have to comply with when you're just a team of one, right? You don't need all the insurances and all the things to protect yourself because there's very little risk as you grow when you're building a business. And then when you're buying a business, there's policies and procedures. So they're coming into your organization, to your new organization, or you're coming into their already existing organization. And these things don't maybe make sense to you. So you have this uphill battle of why are we doing that? Well, because the way we always done it. Well, in some of those cases, they'll be like, yeah, that policy or procedure doesn't make sense. But in a lot of cases, those are their norms. So let's change some of those things. And guess what? You're going to have some turnover in that. When it comes to buying versus building a business, when you're buying a business, you just need to expect that you're going to have turnover. I don't, of the organizations that I wrote down that I have walked beside in the last just couple years where they bought a business, and that included people or the team members that already existed, most of those team members did not work. So whether that was the Dale Carnegie, I have a bar and restaurant example, I have an esthetician example, I have a concrete example, all of those ones, the most of the organization turned over. And one president of one company sat on stage, actually was at a Bremer event, and said something that was really humbling for a lot of people and trying to take some of the emotion out of it is they didn't sign up to work for me. So when you bought that business, all those people had been saying yes to so-and-so leader for X number of years. And just because you made a choice to buy the business and their prior leader made the choice to sell a business, doesn't mean they're going to connect and be excited about following you. And we just need to own that and understand that's just a part of buying a business, is that we're going to have turnover. We don't want to. We can do things to try and minimize it. We can learn from our past and minimize that, but you're going to have that. So for that reason, I think that building a business versus buying a building a business is easier and more sustainable going forward. And then the sixth facet, the one that we're going to cover last, is culture. So culture will eat strategy for lunch. So don't tell Mr. Bankerman that I'm going to talk about this, but we can make money forever and ever under this leadership and then buy a business and lose money because the culture shifted and it stinks, right? So we can, the things that matter in culture, there's a couple notes here too, but if we don't have a good culture, this becomes so hard. So when we measure success, it's not just financial success, it's, do people love their job? Do they want to come and work at your organization day in and day out? And your culture matters because of that. So when it comes to buying a business or building a business, what is the culture facets? So your vision, mission, and values. When you're building a business, you get to walk the talk. You get to just make, I was gonna say make shit up as you go. But really you probably have a vision for it, and maybe you're just piecemealing it, or maybe it's one step at a time. But when you're buying a business, those things already exist. Now whether they're written on the wall or written in a manual or not written at all, and they're unwritten, those three things exist along with the rituals, rewards, and the behaviors. All of that stuff exists whether you know it or not, whether it's written or not. So when it comes to buying a business, the vision, mission, values, you either need to adopt or reinvent them, but they might not be in alignment with you. So thinking about making that very intentional buy, does this vision, and values align with me as the owner?
Also getting
When it comes to rituals and rewards, so what we reward gets repeated. And we say that quite often here at Light. And what we want to think about there. So when we're building a business, we get to show what we value. So for example, we have a lot of childbearing age people in our organization. So at least half the team is going to have more babies. And we have a team of 12, so that means 6 people are going to have more babies in the next few years. We just had, since I threw out like, hey, can we like plan around this? Not like plan, like I'm not telling you when you can have a baby, but when you do know and you're comfortable sharing, please share so that we can plan for the future. But what we reward gets repeated, and I don't want it to be like, oh my gosh, I can't get pregnant because I need to do X number of work at some time. So we just had our first announcement is actually Bryce. So he's not actually giving birth, but his wife Sid will be giving birth here in April. And we want to reward that. So we sent him a little something saying, hey, congrats on number 2. And we want to reward that. The other things that we reward, we don't reward overworking. We reward getting your stuff done efficiently. So we track utilization and some of those other things. We also reward having fun in the workplace. So the individual notes that people get, we reward taking time off. Like I'll write cards and give people cash, don't tell the IRS on when they are going to take a trip, just stuff like that. So we're rewarding the things that we want them to do, the behaviors we want them to exhibit, or if they just kicked ass on a project and it was hard and stressful and you could just see it on their face. Also, just a handwritten note with some cash, and that's just how we get the extra out of everybody. And when it comes to buying, those are already established. So whether they're again written or unwritten. So if somebody were to buy this organization, if I didn't tell them that I occasionally handwrite notes and put cash in the envelope, they wouldn't know that. And then these poor employees would be like, oh, I'm sure she told them that that's part of our compensation. And no, that wouldn't be said. So those norms are already established and they're hard to change. So whether it's meeting cadence, whether it's all those little things you do, like we used to have champagne and celebrations, like we used to do this. So some of that can create animosity in the culture. We just want to try to avoid that. The other thing with culture in building versus buying is behaviors. So when we're building a business, we have the opportunity to model the way, to say, this is how I want you to behave. And when you misstep, Dale Carnegie principle number something is when you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically, because we're going to screw up. If we're building a business, you're not going to have all wins. You're actually going to have, I don't know if it's 51-49 or whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of losses and you're going to make some mistakes. And that's okay. It's better to just acknowledge that, admit it quickly and emphatically, and then move through it. And this is how we're either not going to do it again, or I'm sorry, I was wrong in that situation. I didn't have all the information. Just moving through that quickly. You get to model that behavior. And then when it comes to buying a business, whether they're good or bad, those behaviors are established and those team dynamics and the undercurrents and all that stuff is there. So just being conscious of that. And for those reasons, I would recommend building over buying when it comes to the culture. So how does this work? Because we just went through 6 facets and they're basically 50-50. So it really depends on what your skill sets are and what you're going to work on. And that's the tool I'm going to give you in just a minute. So a summary of all the facets. So when it comes to sales, we have revenue is the big thing. That's the outcome of sales. And buying is the fastest way to success there. When it comes to finance and actually dropping profitability, the bottom line, and getting your return on your investment, again, buying is most often the fastest way there. When it comes to streamline efficiencies and that outcome of streamlining operations, your outcome is efficiencies, then buying is again the quicker way to get there. When it comes to these less tangible things like brand, what do you want to be? Building is a faster way there. Not necessarily from like all your brand standards, but from brand nothingness to these people are the people I want to work with, and you get to be what you want to be. Building works better. Culture, who we are really. Again, building, I'm calling out that building is a faster way to get there because you don't have the history and the preconceived notions that came from buying and being in an organization for a long time. So when it comes to who we are as a culture, building is better. And why you do it, the people, whether that's your internal people or your external people, why you show up every day, that's the outcome of the people component. And building is a faster way to get the right people in the right seats. You buy an organization, they might be the wrong people in the wrong seats, and that can be a distraction from your outcome. Now, so what do you do? If you're sitting on this webinar and you're like, I have a decision to make whether I have maybe an opportunity to buy a business or I've been toying with building a business, what does that look like? What should I do? And the reason that I wanted to break these into these facets is because we all have different skill sets and desires to do these things well. And I just learned this lesson last Friday. So this is hot off the press. It's a tool that a pastor used to help walk a friend of mine through a decision. And it's what are you good at? And what do you like to do? So there's those 2 questions, and it's red light, yellow light, green light. So if you're contemplating with these decisions, whether I build a business or whether I buy a business, and usually it's not I should build or buy. It's I want to do this or I want to do that because opportunities are presenting itself. So whenever you have a decision, you can actually use this model. So red light means you're not good at it and you don't like it. So when we come to these things, sales, if you're not good at it and you don't like it, that's going to be really hard to be successful. If you're starting a business from scratch, that's going to be extremely hard to be successful unless you find a yin to your yang. If you do not like sales, you do not like asking people for money, you better either get good at it or you need to find a yin to your yang. When it comes to the yellow light, not good at it and like to do it. So, what am I not good at that I like to do? Um, like I Drew might argue with me, but I'm not that great at public speaking, but I do like to do it. Um, the other yellow light item could be good at and don't like to do it. So I am good at accounting. I don't love to do accounting, and that's why I have a team of 10 people who that's what they love to do. So they're green light on accounting. And when it comes to the green light, that's good at and like to do it. So when you come back to these things, like if you and you red light or yellow light or green light, these 6 things, I want you to think about, am I good at this? And do I like to do it? Green light. Am I good at this, but don't really like to do it? Yellow light. Do I like to do this, but not good at it? Also yellow light. If I'm not good at it, aka bad at it, and don't like it to do it, it's a red light. And that red light needs to be considered when buying or building business. So take a minute if you haven't already, take a snip, jot that down. Super helpful when it comes to decision making. And then the other thing, and the reason that this matters is because money is emotional. We say that all the time. When Bryce's first week here at Light Consulting, traveling to Grand Forks and talking on the phone to clients the whole time, he said, "So basically, you're a financial therapist." And that's basically what it is. And why that is because money is emotional. So always set a plan. This is a budget and validate it with an expert. So again, core counts, we were going to make $1 billion, no big deal. We did validate it with it. It's just we didn't have the sales component figured out. Like we had people, but not actually a sales expert in it that would say your growth is going to be way slower than what you have here. You're going to actually lose lots of money for 5 years or whatever it is till you make that turn. Now I had the gradual, but the gradual is like 2 years. In 2 years, we should be profitable and just make it big. Guess what? It takes longer than that. Especially in a product-based business versus a sales-based business. And then I always put this add 20%. Everything is way more expensive than you think it's going to be. Your inventory is more expensive. Your people are more expensive. All of the things. So always put together a budget. Be realistic. Run it by an expert. And if you're going to lose money, you can still make that decision. I would just tell you that it's way more fun to make money than it is to lose money. And when you're losing money, the amount of stress and pressure you put on yourself and that the team puts on you or that your spouse puts on you, we'll talk about partners in a minute, is and you get to control you get to control how you deal with that, right? And the bank puts on you when you're losing money is just different. So you want to think if you are building a business that you anticipate is going to lose money for a while, that's where number 2 comes in. Clarify realistic expectations with your partner. When I started Light Consulting and I left my W-2 job, I told Chad I will not contribute to our household at all for at least 3 months. So that's a service-based business. It was just me, not going to contribute to this at all for 3 months. And so he was like, okay, I understand. And just setting that expectation at the front end makes it easier when like July came around and I didn't have any money to contribute to the family fund. So making sure, and whether that's a partner with that you live and go home to every night, or a partner in the business. So making sure that your financial projection is accurate, and then helping both of you understand that we are going to make little or no money for X number of years. And then at some point it's going to tip and we're going to get there, but we don't need to be foo-foo land when it comes to money. We need to be realistic and understand where we need to be or where we even can be at. And conservative. Conservative is the right word. Be conservative on your sales. Maybe add 20% to your expenses. So if it still makes sense, then hopefully you'll end up in the profitable category in a short amount of time. And then overcoming obstacles, take your time. This is not something you should jump into. Surround yourself with experts. So whether that's bankers or accountants or attorneys, for sure need to come in if you're buying a business. If you're setting up a partnership, let's get that attorney on board with that partnership language of what actually is understood and making sure that's in the partnership agreement. And then make your choice. Am I going to start a business? Am I going to buy a business? It's just a choice. It doesn't have to be a choice forever. You're likely going to make a significant time and money investment. So it should be a choice for a period of time to hopefully see it through the down and into the up. But it's just a choice. It's not going to kill you. It's just hopefully make you stronger. You're going to have losses. You're going to have wins. I remember one of Melissa's first days of owning the Dale Carnegie franchise. We had a big yes from a sales perspective before 8 a.m. It was in her inbox. And like her 9 a.m. meeting with the team member was a big sad thing. So like this is what it's like being an entrepreneur and a business owner. So it's super interesting and super fun and you get to experience it all. So this is my team at Light. They're the most amazing humans that any person could surround yourself with. Yes, Royce is the only male on our team. We're working on that. Actually, the next person we're courting is a female as well, but he said he's okay. He'll be okay with just women. All right. That was me talking a lot. What questions or who has the first question? More story to share? All right. Well, hearing no questions, I'm just going to leave you with one more story and caveat, and that our success doesn't mean that you are going to be successful, and our failures don't mean that you're going to be that's going to dictate anything there. So it's a lot of hard work and dedication to the mission, and you will see the fruits of your labor. So in accounting, we know that everything balances always. And I believe that that actually happens in the universe too. So when we think of the outputs and inputs, actually, I think it was Ralph Emerson, talked about the law of compensation. So what you get out of something is what you put into it. Now, the inputs you might not think are super exactly the same when it comes to time, talent, and treasure. It might be different, but if we really want something to be successful and we've done our research to make sure that there's a market that can demand it and you have those six facets taken care of, you should be successful in your organization. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to me at another time, by all means, Drew has my contact information and we'll send a follow-up email. But thank you for spending your lunch hour with me, learning a little bit about what we've learned when it comes to buying or building a business. Thank you and have a great day.